Today I'm talking to Danny Attias, who is the CIO at Anthony Nolan. As many of you might have read, Danny wrote a blog post on LinkedIn recently which described very openly and honestly his journey at Anthony Nolan. And in addition, he very recently achieved number one CIO in the UK as voted by the CIO UK, which is a fantastic achievement. I was really keen to speak to Danny to listen to and understand how he took a technology function that was very much focused on business as usual with some innovation through to a team that you could class as truly disruptive. Just really exploring how he led the team, how he changed the mindset of the team, how he developed the individual team members to match more the current skill set that was needed to enable this innovation and disruption, and also how a disruptive technology function then actually integrates into a wider organization that is very used to very set timescales, outcomes and budgets in terms of projects. And finally, I was interested also to hear about Danny's what he felt was his greatest achievement over the first 3 years. It's a fascinating interview and I hope you really enjoy. So this is interesting because one of the subjects I thought might be quite interesting, and again this is just my view, I was quite interested to understand how you take an organisation from where it is to change it into an organisation that you could consider disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about, I was thinking about things like the people and how you change their, influence their mindset. I'm talking about, the tech team initially. Is how do you take them from business as usual, the analogy is kind of like this to, being disruptive, the kind of wider organization. How on earth do you sort of say to somebody who's holding the purse strings, this is what we're going to do. We're not too sure how long it will take or how much it'll cost, nor actually do we know what the outcome is. That sort of journey to sort of being a business as usual, if you like, with some innovation, to being truly disruptive, and the kind of elements that you focused in on, that I thought would be quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can certainly talk about all of those things succinctly. I mean, the first, because it's got to be succinct. Your first question is, how do you move an organization from being traditional, let's put it like that, to disruptive? And there are a few components there, but if we think about the people component, there's a technology component, and then there's a business component. Actually, I'd always assume the tech component would be easy, right? Because everyone's a technologist, so they want to do things. Not true. It took a year at least. So actually, the very first answer to that whole question is time. Okay. So you cannot do any of this quickly. Just won't work. This is about culture change, and it's got to be done very slowly, very carefully, and very honestly. So making that kind of change with a technology team took time. They had to effectively unlearn the job was to constantly put out fires. They had to unlearn all of those things, and also if you try and get people in to do the day job so that the tech team can then focus on development, then they feel very threatened because they're going, well, hold on, I'm not going to give all the crown jewels to someone else, and it's too complicated. They'd never understand it. So it's how do you do that? Now the way we approach that is that we got a partner alongside to help with new development. We got the existing staff to do apprenticeships to really reskill up, and then over time we transitioned the existing team onto the new development work. But that took at least a year just to get the ball rolling. That's on the people side. On the business side, you articulated it in your question really well. There is this question of planning, future planning. They want to know how much it's going to cost, what it's going to look like, when it's going to deliver, and we just got to go. And the amount of times I've said, I don't know how much it's going to cost. Don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know, again and again and again, and I just reiterated it for years because There was no way. There was only one time when I did give numbers, because we're putting a huge business case. We need to get trustee sign off. And so I made up two numbers, a price and a timeline, which gave us enough budget and enough time to really deliver the project. But I made it very clear to everybody involved, I've just made up these two numbers, right? There was no magic, you know, secret sauce going, we're going to deliver that, followed by that, followed by that. We go, we don't know. So the key message that we try to say to the organization, and this is really hard, is, you know, I asked the question, why do you need to know how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost? And actually, it wasn't about making sure we make the right investment. It was actually about, well, that's how we can hold you accountable to what you said you're going to deliver. I said, well, hold me accountable for what I actually deliver. Hold me accountable for my outcomes, not what I promise. Because also, if I promise you something in 2 years' time, you've got to wait 2 years to figure out whether I've delivered it or not. So let's constantly look at what we deliver. And that mindset, again, really slow and incremental. You've got to make some wins along the way, small incremental wins, and then really shift the dial piece by piece by piece.
And how did you sort of manage or communicate the how did you manage their expectations in terms of what those outcomes would be? Because presumably if you're trying to be disruptive, you're learning as you go along what those outcomes might be. So how did you?
So there was an element of making a lot of mistakes. So there was a bit of legacy blame, and that's on my part. You know, oh well, that's the legacy systems. I can't be held responsible for that. And there comes a point where you know you are responsible for that, but really unstable email systems, for example, where email goes down once a week. No one's actually got a mobile device. We don't have Wi-Fi. They go, well, okay, well, let's just do it a piece at a time. Let's just put in some Wi-Fi. Okay, that was the very first thing I did. That was a pretty big win, very easy to do, and that got a lot of, oh, we're getting something finally. Instead of talking about it, we're getting something. Switching over our email and stuff was really hard, and in a way, I'm talking about infrastructure here, but that was a bit of a distraction. That was, well, we got to get the basics. Also, how can a CEO take you seriously as a CIO if you can't get email working? Bottom line, right? How are they going to trust you with the business, with a seat at the board? If you can't, if she opens up her phone and the email's not syncing anymore, it's like, well, we get the basics right. So and that's really important. That took a couple of years to actually sort out, which gave us enough time to establish a software development capability. So then it's a case of, okay, well, let's train up staff, let's find a partner, let's identify the one thing where we can actually make a difference, the smallest little piece, and then a part of the business that's really chomping at the bit and willing to work with you, and then let's try and make something happen in there. And that took probably about 2 years until we're at the point where email was stable and you've actually started to deliver something. So in this case, it was a new front end to a legacy system. The data was legacy, so they didn't have to worry about what about the data? What about the security? You know, it's built on a robust Oracle platform. We can't mess around with that. It's like, we haven't touched it. It's just simply a front end. But all of a sudden now they can interface with it better. They can cut and paste, which they couldn't do on their VB6 platform. But also they can now do new sorts, new filters, new reports, all off the same platform. And that was a really, really, really good place to start. You know, no regrets about taking that approach. 4 years on, we still haven't finished the back end, right? We're working our way through. This is pretty much a 10-year project to decommission this monolith. But at all times, the core data still is in exactly the same place in a very kind of secure, resilient, performant manner. It was just the front end and the interactivity that was no good. So we've added business benefit, speed, efficiency, all the way through by changing the front end and then taking functions off piece by piece by piece so that they're independent of each other.
Good stuff. In terms of the team itself, how has the sort of team evolved and adapted to this idea of innovating and being disruptive in terms of sort of brainstorming ideas? Is that done as a collective? How do you ensure that everybody is heard and included, and how does the team feel about putting their hand up and saying, I've got this idea, knowing that it's a safe environment to come up with something radical?
That's a really good question. A lot of the initial planning was done with an external development partner and myself and my very close team.
Yeah.
The original team was still very worried, about just keeping the plate spinning effectively and putting out those fires. As and of course then early intervention meant that the team were going, well, that won't work, that won't work, that won't work. But then over time, as they built up their skills, as they built up their confidence, as they lost things that they no longer have to support because they've got new solutions, they're now able, really, the original team of three that were there when I started, who have now been through their apprenticeships, are now leading on the design of the development. So one of them is leading on developing a global open source search algorithm for matching patients and donors.
Yeah.
We've just in the final steps of handing that over to the World Marrow Donor Association,
Yes. Yeah.
but also the world. So we're just saying, you go with this, but this one developer has led on that. Another developer is very much leading on rebuilding our entire lab's information management system. I mean, it's huge, but in a real modern decoupled microservice architecture, which the word API was alien when we started this process, and to get from there to here is just a huge step. So that team are now part of that process. They're part of the design, regular retros. So when you're reviewing, have I done the right thing, every 2 weeks is very different to never reviewing whether you're building the right thing at all. There's a huge gap between the two, and now no longer, we're never in a retro where people are feeling threatened or they're defending themselves. They are just saying what we learned from this, and that all those agile practices within the tech team, but then taking those agile practices and putting them into the business, where there's a crisis and we run in and do a retro, and they're going, what's happening? If you pitch it right, they don't feel too threatened, and then they can talk about the problem and how it occurred.
Brilliant. Did the apprenticeship thing sound as though it was a roaring success, to say the very least? Is that now going to be an ongoing program, if you like, within Anthony Nolan?
Yeah, so we had 3 established developers whose development knowledge was dated, who really needed a proper refresh. So those 3 were there when they started nearly 4 years ago. So it was pretty early on in the whole apprenticeship. We now have, we've entered 5 people to do a data fellowship program for 18 months. We have 23 people across the organization doing management training and early years leadership training. And I'm now working with various companies about trying to take bits out of the apprenticeships and package them up into small digestible chunks for everybody across the organization, so that everyone understands the fundamentals of data and collaboration and reporting. And we work through the various components of whether it's lean, agile, insight, collaboration, ideation, service design, customer driven, all of those components. But what we want to do is not just have 5 courses, but show how they all come together and really just raise the digital literacy of the entire organization. That's the kind of challenge for this year, and it's going to be quite hard, but it's worth doing. I'll give you one example, particularly in the charity sector. There were 2 people having a conversation. Sounds like the lead up to a joke, and one of them kept saying supporter value, and the other. So one of them was hearing, what value do we get from our supporter? The other was saying, what value do we provide our supporters? And they're completely different things. One's about an internal benefits-driven approach, and the other is about a customer-driven approach. If we can get to a point where we say the word supporter value and people understand instinctively that means what are we doing for our customer, then we know we've made it. We've shifted the dial into being a very customer-focused organization.
Good stuff. Do you collaborate a lot with other charities and not-for-profit in terms of sharing. So you've made the open source project available to all. How much sort of collaboration is there with other charities, and how beneficial is that, for you and the other charity involved?
So to date, most of my charity collaboration have been through Charity IT Leaders.
Okay.
Which I've been a trustee on for a couple of years, and that's mostly about thought collaboration, experience collaboration. I've not collaborated actual product, although if we have a good idea, then there's no barrier. The network is already there, but it's mostly about who's got experience of this, who's had a supplier on that, or someone from my team is looking to move on. Have you got an opportunity? That kind of collaboration is happening all the time. Charity IT Leaders really helps with that communication. Yeah. But I'd love to see more. The idea of doing something open source is pretty hard going. But I'd like to see more collaboration on actual product, on actual, not data sharing or anything like that. Yes. But platforms, it's normally that's driven by suppliers. So someone has an idea, they go and create a product, and then they try and get lots of charities on board. But I think there's more opportunity there, definitely. Yeah.
And final question: what are you sort of most proud about in terms of what's been achieved over the last sort of 3 or 4 years?
It's the team. It's the journey that the team are self-sufficient, continuously growing. We're now able to attract really great candidates. We just got 2 just an hour ago. I just got confirmation of 2 new people starting on the 5th of Jan. Really high quality, really experienced individuals. So the fact that the team are now able to be self-sufficient, able to challenge, able to grow and drive is really where we want to get to. Now it's about taking the rest of the charity on that journey. We're halfway there already, which is great. We need to finish that journey and make the whole organization completely customer centric.
Brilliant.